The SHRM Foundation has produced a new educational HR video series hosted by Wayne Cassio, Professor of Management at the University of Colorado at Denver. Recognized as one of the world's foremost experts in the field of human resources and management, Wayne has consulted with over 150 organizations on 6 continents. He has written 18 books, including a classic HR textbook and the bestseller, Responsible Restructuring. The video series produced by the SHRM Foundation breaks new ground for the HR profession by showing how HR provides strategic leadership in organizations today. The series is made up of 4 thought-provoking shows. HR Role Models explores what it takes for HR to be a strategic business leader.
And if you hire me, you'll get someone who understands your business as well as any of the other senior executives on your team.
By looking at 3 progressive companies, HR in Sync illustrates how CEOs and Chief HR Officers can work seamlessly together to meet business challenges.
I don't think there's any question that the Chief Human Resources individual has got to be a strategic partner.
I believe is one of the key roles of the human resources executive is to participate in business meetings and business issues and business planning as a peer executive.
The 2-part show, HR in High Tech, explores the challenges facing large and small companies in Silicon Valley.
The early stage companies, the HR role is even more critical because you need to understand how the company is being funded and capitalized.
This series is an ideal educational tool for use in HR academic programs and SHRM chapters and in companies across the country.
You have a great opportunity to be a strategic business partner, an HR business leader. And when you do that, you add value to your organization, and you become a hero and a role model in your company and in your profession.
The SHRM Foundation wishes to thank all of the CEOs and HR executives who helped make this series possible by giving so generously of their time and energy, and to the Area 2 SHRM members for their support. This has been an SHRM Foundation presentation. The SHRM Foundation presents HR Role Models, hosted by Wayne Cassio.
Hi, I'm Wayne Cassio. What does it mean to be a strategic business partner?
Now, one of the major challenges that most HR people face is the view of the role of human resources.
Some advice I would also give is I've sometimes asked people, why are you interested in a career in human resources? And if they say to me, it's because I love working with people, I become a little suspect, because it's more than that.
It's true, and I think one of the tough things about HR, I think our natural inclination is to want to have everybody like us.
I would just add that if there's anything that's critical in my role, it's what I call courageous leadership. You have to be able to take what you know about the business, what you know about HR, and then put it on the table in front of the executive team and not be afraid to really insert your point of view.
I don't think there's any question that the Chief Human Resources individual has got to be a strategic partner.
According to a recent survey, half of HR professionals see themselves this way. Yet SHRM Foundation and Towers Perrin research shows that fewer than 1 in 5 HR professionals are actually part of the pre-deal phase of mergers and acquisitions. So there seems to be some confusion between how HR professionals see themselves and how senior managers see them. To resolve this, we spoke with some CEOs and HR leaders in progressive companies in which HR is a strategic business partner to find out what they do that makes them so effective.
The strategic business partner in our organization is somebody who I think really understands the business.
I reported to the CEO, and actually when I first became head of human resources, we had a management committee comprised of only 5 of the senior leaders. I was on that with our chief financial officer, chief legal officer, head of pharmaceuticals, and the CEO. So I was very much involved in the strategy and the key issues in the company.
HR leadership, influence and leadership, is all about understanding the business well enough that what you do recommend adds value to the bottom line of the organization.
It's only until you understand the business that you can sit at the table with the rest of your executive colleagues and bring any level of credibility to the organization.
What are some of the competencies that a person needs to play this role?
It's clear to me now that if you don't understand the business, if you really don't understand the company you work for, and you don't understand the language of business, then you really can't get invited to the table.
HR has to create an overall talent or people mindset for a company, and I think that you build the capabilities by having that and helping shape everyone within the organization's thinking about what kind of talent are we looking for, what do we need, what will we need, what does the role of talent play in delivering the end result that our customers are looking for.
I think it's important to have numbers, but I think it's more important that those numbers support key themes or initiatives that are aligned with the strategy of the company.
If you hire me, you'll get someone who understands your business as well as any of the other senior executives on your team. Will understand your financials and how they work, who your customers are, what your value equation is, how your business operates. Then what I do is help craft a business strategy that aligns your HR function and your HR strategy with the overall business to drive business results.
Well, I've worked with a number of really value-added strategic thinkers, and I think in a general sense, I think people that were willing to question me. People that would hear an idea, we're full of ideas. We wake up in the morning, we have ideas. And what saves us is the countless, just as important as the ideas that we implement are the ideas that were talked out of. And people, strategic partners who are able to say, that's a horrible idea, and I'm going to tell you why, A, B, C, D, and E. And you sit back and you say, you know what, you're right, that is a bad idea. Let's go on to the next one.
Okay, here are some general themes that we've been hearing. 1, understand your business. 2, be able to create an HR strategy that aligns people and processes and systems. 3, use numbers in doing that, but be sure the numbers themselves are meaningful in terms of the strategy of the company. 4, be independent enough to question your boss. And 5, always look for opportunities to create an overall talent or people mindset. Now that we understand the competencies needed, the next question is, how does HR add value to the business? Charlie Tharp was involved from day one in the successful merger of the Bristol-Myers and Squibb companies.
Bristol-Myers Squibb and Squibb itself, before when Bristol-Myers Squibb first bought it, was very much focused on the intellectual property of the company, and the key to that are the scientists, the important products they develop, they launch, they sell. And so the due diligence during the merger and acquisition wasn't going out and counting factory machines or buildings or distribution routes or trucks. It was really doing an assessment of the talent in the organization, because that's what we were buying. The intellectual property in the form of trademarks, but more importantly the people that developed the products that generated that income.
HR also plays an important role in ensuring that ethical standards and good corporate governance principles are actually practiced. Jim Wilkerson of ABB Vetco Gray has global responsibility for HR with about 4,000 employees scattered across 27 countries. He had this to say about his company's approach.
Because we deal in a lot of third world countries, and certainly the opportunity for unethical or even clear violations of the U.S. statutes could happen. We've done a couple things. We've engaged a company, and we now put all of our employees through training. And the training is based around the ABB policies of what is ethical and good business practices. We have a monthly meeting, and we affectionately call it we like anachronisms like everyone else. So we have a U&E meeting, which means an update and exchange meeting. And this is an opportunity for us also to talk about ethics, how to handle situations as they arrive. We're really sensitive about this, very sensitive, particularly among our sales force, so we really work with them.
It's clear that in leading companies, HR is playing a much more strategic role. What can you do as a student or a professional within HR to take advantage of emerging opportunities in the field?
Well, I think there's more than one legitimate way into the HR chair, and I think we talk about that a lot. I've seen some great HR people who've come in from other departments and found it as a calling. So that would be my first advice is don't worry where you came from. Just once you're there, really start to know your stuff, because there's a lot of content in HR.
I also think that, I agree completely, there's many paths, but one thing I think that is defining for many people is to have some experience supervising in a non-HR environment, in a line environment, in customer service, or in some level of first-level supervision, because so much of what we're doing in HR is delivered to that first-line supervisor and accelerating them to the next level.
There are choices, play to your strengths, think about where you believe you would flourish and prosper best as a contributor. Find that environment. Don't take the first environment that comes your way. Find the environment that matches you. You can do it.
I tell my HR people to go to the second shift. You know, go and live on the second shift for a couple weeks. Make sales calls with the customers. You know, I think it's just being interested and being really engaged in the company that you work for.
So take as many lateral roles as you possibly can. I would highly recommend that you take a role outside of HR after you've been in your career for a little while to fully understand what a great HR partner really is all about.
First of all, don't be afraid to get out of your comfort zone. If you're starting recruiting, a lot of times people stay in that one functional area.
Yes.
And it's very important to learn every aspect of human resources, particularly if you expect to lead it one day.
Human resources is literally at the epicenter of the organization. All of the businesses, all of the functions, all of the activities are available to the human resource function. There's virtually no better place to be to learn about all areas of the business.
I cannot think of any other career that's more exciting and more challenging right now than human resources.
You have a great opportunity to be a strategic business partner, an HR business leader. And when you do that, you add value to your organization. And you become a hero and a role model in your company and in your profession.
The SHRM Foundation wishes to thank all of the CEOs and HR executives who helped make this series possible by giving so generously of their time and energy, and to the Area 2 SHRM members for their support. This has been an SHRM Foundation presentation. The SHRM Foundation presents HR in Sync, hosted by Wayne Cassio.
Hi, I'm Wayne Cassio. HR doesn't operate in a vacuum. In fact, in progressive companies, the HR head and CEO act as partners. When they are in sync, then synergy and magic happen. We spoke with 3 pairs of CEOs and their top HR officers. One company met significant business challenges by turning around a mature organization. The second is seeking to maintain a high-performance organization. And the challenge in the third is to build a new one from 3 different cultures. Fred DeBona, CEO of Independence Blue Cross Blue Shield, and Joe Frick, Chief HR Officer, faced the challenge of reinvigorating a company that had been losing market share.
We had a plethora of problems ranging from the simple blocking and tackling. Answer the phones, process claims, and we just weren't very good at it. And as a result, we were losing customers more and more each year.
Our CEO, Fred DeBona, joined Independence Blue Cross in 1990 at a time where the organization, both externally and internally, was performing poorly.
Our HR officers played a tremendous role. Without the support and strategic alignments with HR, we could not have carried out, because like any other business, we're a people business. Yes. It's people who answer the phones, people who process the claims, people who provide the new products, who set the rates, who market and sell our products. It's people who do all that, and we needed an HR team that was capable of bringing in the best talent available, and just as importantly, to retain that talent.
I was contacted by a search agency. I was working for another large company here in town, and happy and not willing to make a move, and the search consultant said, "You have to meet Fred DeBona."
I don't think there's any question that the chief human resources individual has got to be a strategic partner. And there's two sides to that coin. First, that individual has to demonstrate the credibility and ability within the organization to sit at the table. And that happens a lot in many organizations. Unfortunately, the opportunity isn't granted for that person to sit there. So first you need an HR person who's capable of doing it, and then you need a CEO, I believe, or top management who understands that that person needs to be at that table if the organization is to flourish. When you have that combination, it works.
Fred said, "You know, Joe, we've been at this for about 2 years since I've been here, and the organization really is starting to move forward, and people are coming together, and there's a buzz in this place, and there's energy and enthusiasm. The results are looking good. But the most significant issue facing me right now is that the human resources function, which I fully expected to be one of the catalysts, one of the facilitators, one of the functions that was really out in front and leading this organizational transformation, I feel that we're dragging them along, kicking and screaming, and it's really perplexing to me. And I can't tell you today that I know exactly what the HR function should be championing, should be advocating, should be doing, but I do know that what I have and what this organization needs and expects is far different than what we have today.
You know, people always have this idea that HR is telling you something. What's extremely important to HR is to listen and learn.
If I remember some of the comments that I heard most and often in my first year here was, you know, I can't believe you're spending this much time with us. You know, human resources typically here had designed programs or policies or procedures in a vacuum and then thrust them on us. And you're taking actually a drastically different approach. What you all are saying is you're here to learn, you're here to understand, you're here to help, and you're going to deliver to us responses to our business needs.
When they do that, they establish that credibility, and people feel good about it. They believe they have a partner. Now you take that partner and you put them at the table, the strategic table, the table that's going to set the strategy, set the vision, carry out the imperatives of that corporation. Then you've got a strategic partner, and you've created for yourself and for the company an invaluable executive.
I believe is one of the key roles of the human resources executive is to participate in business meetings, in business issues, in business planning as a peer executive without wearing a functional hat, but wearing your business hat, and to dialogue and discuss and debate and troubleshoot.
Numbers are the language of business, and everyone needs to utilize numbers. We don't expect in our business for our HR people to be actuaries.
Yes.
They're not going to be that technical in their numbers. But they have to understand numbers. They have to understand the return on the investment. They have to know, what does it cost the company when you bring someone in and that person's not successful?
But I think the appreciation and the understanding that human resources does have to exemplify and exhibit the language of business, which is numbers and which is financial data, is important. So I think my staff delights in the fact that when we design variable pay programs and incentive programs, that we base those programs on how it's going to benefit the organization if they're successful. And we design those programs with business in mind and with financial return on investment in mind.
Individually, I think our HR individual, Joe Frick, is the best at the top of his game. I think any company would be fortunate to have him as their chief human resource officer.
You know what? I really feel good about being a part of this company, but most importantly, I feel really good that our CEO both understands and appreciates the work that I do.
We've gone from under 2 million lives covered to over 4 million lives covered in that period. And we've seen our revenues grow from just under $2 billion to about $8 billion.
And in many companies, the top management is really not accessible and far removed from the associates. But in our organization, our CEO, Fred DeBona, makes it a point to do everything he can to stay connected to our workforce, and it's truly appreciated. It makes quite a difference in how we service our customers.
David Brennan, CEO of AstraZeneca, and his top HR officer, Lynn Tetro, faced a major challenge: to build a new company culture following mergers and acquisitions that resulted in AstraZeneca, and to meld three national cultures: Swedish, British, and North American. AstraZeneca is the 5th largest pharmaceuticals company in the world. We asked them what role HR played in this transition and how they are working together to make it happen.
The strategic business partner in our organization is somebody who I think really understands the business. I mentioned earlier the changes that are taking place in our environment, but it also brings about a lot of change within the company, and I think our strategic partners are people who have a sense of the external drivers as well as the impact of those on our overall business, our employee population.
I think the role that I play and my team plays is very much around supporting change, building a change management capability for the business. The other role that I play is certainly understanding what the business's goals are and making sure that we translate that into effective programs and management practices to enable the business to be successful.
I think the merger of Astra and Zeneca to create one company is a time of great uncertainty and anxiety in a corporation and in the feelings of the people. And I think our strategic business partners were able to understand the feeling of the organization.
As we understood how our employees felt about what the future business might look like before we even consummated the merger. So we understood what their concerns and fears were as well as what their hopes were. And then we built our culture taking a lot of that into account. So the culture that we've ended up creating was one that our employees really strongly contributed to from the outset.
And I think the transformation initiative we've undertaken in our own organization has been enabled by our strategic business partners because they have sensed what some of the needs are. So they sensed that we needed strong leadership to bring about significant change.
Have been to, as an example, put together a top-notch leadership program for our top 100 leaders. We call it the Transformational Leadership Program because we're trying to transform the business, and I firmly believe that businesses don't transform, individuals do. And if the leaders don't transform at a senior level, we have no hope of our employees wanting to also follow that route. And that's been very successful.
Our HR leader is the person who serves at my staff meeting as a bit of a conscience about what else is going on in the organization. She's the person who speaks up on what are sometimes unspeakable issues. And I think that's not just a skill, but a characteristic of a successful business partner. Somebody who's willing to deal with what is probably the inevitable.
I think my role with David is very much to be a speaking partner for him, to understand not only what's in his head in terms of where he wants the business to go, but also what's in his heart. And if I can see both those things, then it makes it much easier for me to guide my team to put the necessary programs or practices in place in order to help to create a culture or drive that change. I also have to be a mirror to him.
Lynn acts as a mirror for her CEO, sometimes challenging him on his thinking. She's not afraid to speak up on difficult issues, and he's open to that approach. That synergy makes for a successful partnership.
Frequently, one of us will say, is there an elephant in the room here that we're not talking about? And that has very much been enabled by the culture that gets created when you have somebody who's willing to, as I said, speak the unspeakable sometimes.
Energy, passion, drive, leadership. These are the kinds of characteristics it takes to turn around a mature organization, and they've got all of those. John Bachman, CEO, and Michael Holmes, head of human resources of Edward Jones and Company, faced a special challenge: to maintain a high-performance organization that had been named by Fortune magazine as the best company to work for in America 2 years in a row.
Every organization has a business model. Some are highly regimented, some are as, I suppose, as loose as a basketball team or a jazz group, those kinds of things. The model that we think of at Edward Jones is the orchestra, and this is how we see the organization. If you're a part of Edward Jones, you're there because you have an important contribution to make. It may be large, it may be small, but it's important.
HR is a close business partner within Edward Jones. Not only do I sit on the executive committee and the management committee for the firm, but I get involved in the day-to-day decisions in terms of, do we expand to this new country?
Well, our chief HR officer is in a critical position because our business is based on people and the performance of people.
When we have discussions in terms of product, I'm there at the table answering those questions and providing input just as any other senior executive would be in the business. In fact, I have my securities license, and I've actually gone out and run an office for several weeks. I think it's critical that you spend time in the field, and that if you're in a particular area, that you understand that business as well as any of the other senior executives that are at the table.
And it's through human resources that we generally get our people. So they're the ones out in the marketplace finding people. Candidly, we've got an interesting problem at Edward Jones because since Fortune ranked us #1, we get 15,000 applications, or I shouldn't say applications, inquiries a month for 200 investment representative positions that we train for a month, and we get tens of thousands of inquiries about positions in headquarters. So they have a huge job in just sorting through the inquiries and applications.
One of the things that we identified early on was that our culture was a competitive advantage, and we did not want to lose that culture. We were concerned that we were hiring all these new associates and what that can do to our culture. So we started building systems to reinforce our culture.
Well, our chief HR person is, I suppose, a carrier and an embedder, because one of the things we focus on very, very closely at Jones is the fact that we're organized around serving one customer, the serious individual investor, one way.
Everything we do is really aligned to reinforce our culture. Our management training is aligned. The leadership model that we've developed, everything reinforces who we are and what we value. Most importantly, the decisions that we make day to day reflect who we really are and reinforce our culture.
Certain aspects of culture that need to be embedded in that training, so that as a person is learning about how you do those things at Edward Jones, it's in a context of a very tight alignment with whom we're serving and how we intend to serve them.
You know, Edward Jones has always invested in training because we believe that training is an investment in the individual and it pays off in the long term. Now, if you take a look at our training programs, they're really all built around the competencies that we think it takes for you to be an effective contributor to the organization or an effective leader to the organization. People can actually go online and take a look at the competency they want to develop, and then they can take a program that'll help reinforce or develop those skills. That's the difference between providing training and providing meaningful training. We're helping them to build the skills that they need to contribute to the organization both today and in the future. John and I work together very effectively, and I think it's because we share a common vision of where the organization is going. We spend time discussing that, we discuss our future, and then he trusts me to be able to deliver my part of providing the HR support for the organization to achieve that vision. That built-in trust, that inherent trust, I think is important in any relationship between a CEO and their chief human resource officer.
3 progressive companies that are successfully meeting tough business challenges. In each one, the CEO and top HR officer are in sync. They share common values, have a common vision of where they want their company to go, and the role that people should play in getting there. It's a formula that works both for their companies and for their employees, and it will work for your company and your employees too.
The SHRM Foundation wishes to thank all of the CEOs and HR executives who helped make this series possible by giving so generously of their time and energy, and to the Area 2 SHRM members for their support. This has been an SHRM Foundation presentation. The SHRM Foundation presents HR in High Tech, Large Companies. Hosted by Wayne Cassio.
Hi, I'm Wayne Cassio. Most high-tech organizations compete for business in the marketplace using a strategy of innovation. They develop and make available products and services that never existed before. To do that, they rely heavily on the knowledge and creativity of their workforces and their ability to solve problems that customers think are important. This is a great opportunity for HR business leadership. But with the opportunities come challenges. To understand these challenges and opportunity, I spoke with 3 HR business leaders from large Silicon Valley companies, Kate DeCamp, Libby Sartain, and Gwen McDonald. Maybe we could begin by having you tell us a little bit about your career as a... Gwen, could you start us off?
Yeah, I've been in the human resources field all of my profession. I've been in high tech all of my profession. So I started in the human resources field in 1979, working for a semiconductor company, and actually began working in the functional areas of human resources. Had the fortune and the opportunity to hit almost all of the functional areas. And then there was an acquisition, and we moved to what now is considered a decentralized model, where you have generalists. The notion of generalists came into play. So I've hit all of the various HR functions, and now I'm at 3Com, and I've been there for 12 years.
Libby?
I made an early decision, like Gwen, to get into HR. I actually majored in it in college, a few more rarity. Got an undergraduate degree in organizational behavior and a master's in personnel, we called it then, and industrial relations. But it was an MBA, so I always had the business perspective.
Kate, how about you?
I actually started as an actuarial trainee on commercial pension plans for Aetna, and because I had that math capability, I transitioned into compensation. And then Aetna actually made me take a new job every year for 9 years. So I sort of learned by their design. And I went from there to a company called Blue Cross Blue Shield of Indiana, which became Anthem. And it was in a turnaround, go public mode. So the richness of the experience of turning a business around and taking it public afforded some opportunities. And I also had a mentor there who was the CFO, who really was instrumental in inserting me in the business stuff. I went from there to GE Capital, which was nothing but a nonstop learning opportunity from day to day, and I was there about 7 years and then came to Cisco about 3 years ago.
Finding and keeping talent is one of the most critical challenges that high-tech companies face, especially during swings in the business cycle. Could you describe a difficult HR business challenge that you had to face, a leadership challenge that you had to face, and how you dealt with it?
Big challenge for me today is the instilling a longer range view on people and the investment in people in a relatively young company that's frankly been very successful. So to some degree, success makes people think they don't have to pay attention to the little details. Right. On the other hand, there's a lot of resonance in the company about being built to last and investing heavily in people for the future so that we're a long-term player. So, but it's a constant challenge to make sure everyone in the company is aligned around that people investment strategy and that they see it as a serious business purpose. And at the same time that they themselves keep some joy around the people management, because I resonate that as well, that if you could get very bookish and serious about this, and then it ceases to be a connect point for your employees.
Good. Gwen, how about you?
3Com has, at one point in time, was about 12,000 employees, and we are right now about 4,200 employees. So that is a huge business challenge, and it has been a huge business challenge in the last year, both in terms of trying to identify what is 3Com going to be in the next 2 to 3 years, and going back to Kate's point around what is the talent that we are going to need, and more importantly, those individuals that you have to to depart from 3Com, how do you ensure that you treat them with fairness, equity, respect? So that entire challenge of and making sure that the management is also sensitive to that whole process. And then the biggest piece is re-engaging your current workforce that is there.
How do you deal with that?
Communication is probably the most critical, and both in terms of honest communication, some sobering communication, and giving individuals some hope that this is, at the end of the day, this is there needs to be some unflailing hope and faith at the end of the day that we've made the right decisions.
You're trying to give the remaining employees a reason to stay.
Exactly.
Yeah. Kate, how about you?
We had to actually, you build some momentum by engaging key customers in the problem. You can't just sit in a little room with HR and strategize something. You have to say, this is a management problem. Let's pull in a few key thinkers to work on this with us. They become champions for a solution. You have to give up owning the solution. It has to be the company's, and you keep on it relentlessly, and you smile a lot, because the tougher the message, the more you smile, it seems to work. Good skill for life, too, I think. But
what's your thinking about HR business leadership? Does it vary in a large company compared to a small company? What do you think, Libby?
Well, I think the basic job of HR is the same no matter where you work, but the size of the company very much affects what you're doing on a daily basis. In a startup, you may be the only person, the culture is just forming, and your number one goal is, how do I get the people in here with not much to pay, probably, who can develop this product and take it to market? And meanwhile, how do I keep us out of jail? Because there's a certain amount of compliance that has to happen. As you get to the growth phase, which is where I'm working at Yahoo right now, now you've got to sit there and say, what kind of infrastructure can we build that's scalable, where we can keep growing? And what are the best aspects of our culture that we want to retain? And what are some of the parts of our culture that happened during startup that we need to shed so that we can be built to last and we can make it? And then you get to the more mature stage, where you really are leading the leader. It's less hands-on, and you have to be very strategic. You have to create the agenda. That's where I eventually got in my former role with Southwest Airlines. But now you have to be less hands-on and more of creating the agenda, but you also have to be able to remember that you're reinventing yourself and you're evolving to keep it fresh.
Kate, how about you?
Earlier stage companies and smaller companies share the commonality. They often are the same company, but they also share not having resources. And in some respects, that means you roll your sleeves up more, but it also means that you get to do things that you wouldn't be allowed to do in a large company. In a large company, navigating and influencing and working with people is much more of the skill set, because there are more people to get people aligned, to share a charter, to let you in and for you to let them in is the different skill set.
Gwen, how about you?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with my colleagues. I think the one thing that I would add to that would be that irrespective of whether you're in a small company or a large company, your core ideologies don't change. But I think that who you are, what you bring to the table, your value system and your core ideologies of what's important really still keeps you grounded.
Do you think HR business leadership varies across industry? Libby?
I think it does vary somewhat, but again, it's always that same role. But if you're dealing with employees that are basically on the ramp in an airline like I did, or on the shop floor, it's a different kind of employee that has different needs than knowledge workers that we face here in the Silicon Valley. Different needs, and so the challenge for HR is we basically have a package of products and services that we offer to our internal employees. Which are the ones that will be the most interesting to the workforce that we have in mind?
You know, we've been talking a lot about looking beyond the HR function, but now I'd like to shift focus to look within the HR function and ask how you are helping the HR function to be a leadership function. Kate, could you?
I've rotated 83% of the HR people into new roles in the last year. I feel like going to do something you're not good at reopens your brain to learning.
Yes.
And I've also taken some people from the business functions into HR and from HR out into the business functions. And again, just to create this idea of a learning culture. And that specialization is okay, but specialist with context is always better than specialist with no context.
Right. Do you find that when people rotate out of the function and then come back to it, that they come back into it with a different perspective?
Yeah, and it's interesting. My biggest thing that I'm proud of now is I've actually got people from engineering, sales, finance, and manufacturing at the VP level saying, I really think I should do some time in HR, which was, you guys know, that's a big deal. And it's like, because I think I'd learn management better in HR than where I've been. The people rotating out, they get an appreciation for the company that's hard to get if you've only ever been in one function.
Thanks. Gwen?
At a minimum that they have, that they attend all of the meetings around our business, but they also have a business leader come into their staff meetings once a quarter to talk about what's going on with the business, particularly from a staffing perspective. How many days when the position is open does it cost the company in terms of products or in terms of getting things out to market? So the connection has to be there, and they have to understand, okay, so what I do really does kind of just not hiring a person. It has some. There is clearly a continuum between me hiring a person and you getting that product out and the customer buying it and 3Com making money.
Yes. Libby?
I think the very first thing was to really help our HR team as a whole focus on the overall corporate agenda and objectives.
Yes.
And then align what we're doing around those key objectives. As basic as that sounded.
Yep.
That wasn't happening, and that's what we needed to focus on first. And then to create a whole talent acquisition and development mindset for the organization. Another huge issue for us was in the recognition and rewards area, because stock options were king in the Silicon Valley, and suddenly they're not as important as they used to be. So we had to put in a real recognition and reward and compensation program that looked at both short-term and long-term incentives. And so people could see that I'm going to be paid fairly, I'm going to be rewarded, and I have a place to progress. And they had to get over their disappointment that they would not be a mega millionaire within the first 18 months of working there. So that was part of it.
What advice would you offer to someone who wants to develop his or her HR business leadership skills? Libby, can you start us off?
Well, I think there's more than one legitimate way into the HR chair, and I think we talk about that a lot. I've seen some great HR people who've come in from other departments and found it as a calling. So that would be my first advice is don't worry where you came from. Just once you're there, really start to know your stuff, because there's a lot of content in HR. Then basic execution. I think you can't do anything strategic unless you can get delivery of basic HR services right. And that's a lot of work, and it's not glamorous, but you got to do that right to move on with the better stuff.
Yeah. Kate, how about you?
Seek out unusual opportunities that are really tough, things that are hard to do. I also think that, I agree completely there's many paths, but one thing I think that is defining for many people is to have some experience supervising in a non-HR environment, in a line environment, in customer service, or in some level of first-level supervision, because so much of what we're doing in HR is delivered to that first-line supervisor and accelerating them to the next level.
Good. Gwen, how about you?
And I would also talk a little bit about being able to have the opportunity to get some diversity in terms of the HR disciplines, so that, because each of them are connected. I mean, they're not silos, they're all connected in order to deliver a effective system to the organization. So having that opportunity. The other perspective is, given that this, where we are today in the overall country, being able to have some global perspective, because as we see, particularly here in high tech, a lot of our business is going to be outsourced or going outside the organization. So and so that whole global piece is going to be critical for that, for the 21st century HR person.
We've heard a lot of wisdom in these comments. Let's summarize some key points. 1, in terms of HR business leadership, whether you work for a large or a small company, it's important to develop a business perspective in addition to a people perspective. 2, for career development purposes, it's helpful to spend some time in a line operation in order to get to know the business. 3, HR business leadership evolves as companies develop, from the initial startup phase to the high growth phase to the mature phase. In addition, the package of HR products and services is likely to differ for production workers as opposed to knowledge workers. 4, HR business leaders truly rise to the challenge when the economy sinks. They lead by example. They make decisions that are in the best interests of their organization and their employees. They communicate those decisions honestly, and they never fail to treat people with respect and dignity. And 5, the HR function can and should also serve as a leadership function. For example, by developing an annual business plan, or by serving as an important job rotation destination for managers in HR, as well as managers from other functional areas. 6, finally, in terms of career advice, no matter where you come from, you simply must be competent in each of the functional areas within HR. Don't be afraid to reach out beyond HR for help. Work hard to develop a global perspective. And above all, never stop learning. We are witnessing a seismic shift in economic life, from manufacturing to service, from physical labor to mental work. Knowledge workers will dominate the 21st century. HR has a great opportunity to facilitate that trend and to enable creativity and innovation. You can be part of that. Choice is yours.
The SHRM Foundation wishes to thank all of the CEOs and HR executives who helped make this series possible by giving so generously of their time and energy, and to the Area 2 SHRM members for their support. This has been an SHRM Foundation presentation. The SHRM Foundation presents HR in High Tech, Small Companies, hosted by Wayne Cassio.
Hi, I'm Wayne Cassio. Most high-tech organizations compete for business in the marketplace using a strategy of innovation. They develop and make available products and services that never existed before. To do that, they rely heavily on the knowledge and creativity of their workforces and their ability to solve problems that customers think are important. This is a great opportunity for HR business leadership. But with the opportunities come challenges. To understand these challenges and opportunities, I spoke with two business leaders from small Silicon Valley companies, Peg Wynn and Eileen Schloss. Maybe it would help if you could share with us a little bit about your own careers. Peg, could you?
Sure, I'll be glad to talk about that. I've had an absolutely amazing career, and I will also tell you it was not planned this way. So I think one of the first lessons is really being willing to follow your gut with respect to the forks in the road. I started out at Intel as a recruiter and had the opportunity in my 14 years at Intel to have 17 different jobs. And what that really meant is taking lateral moves to be a part of different divisions inside of the company, as well as all of the different functions within HR, so that I could learn from different bosses.
Were some of those jobs outside of HR?
Absolutely. In fact, 10 years into my HR career at Intel, I had the opportunity to run the mask design and engineering organization.
How did that affect your ability to work in HR when you came back to the function?
I was much more business focused and oriented. I really understood what it was this team of people or a whole team of engineers needed to do to get the job done. And I was able to more effectively partner with the managers to help them strategize how to put the right people in the right job, how to motivate their team to get the results that they were looking for.
Wonderful.
And it literally changed how I did HR from then on out.
Very helpful. Eileen, how about you?
Well, it's interesting. I've had a lot of parallel experiences to Peg. I did start out my career as well at Hewlett-Packard in recruiting. And when you start in recruiting, you have to understand the business that you're recruiting for. So it forces you to go out there and talk to the line managers. So from there, I also, after many years of being in multiple functional areas in HR, had the opportunity when I was with Tandem Computers to completely leave HR and run the education division. The real challenge or learning experience for me was I had revenue responsibility for the first time in my life. And for my first quarter, I ran the education division kind of more from a people standpoint, an HR perspective. Well, what I learned very quickly in the first quarter when I didn't meet my first revenue goal is what perspective you get on the business, meeting your revenue goals. So my first challenge was inheriting direct reports, which were much more technical than I was. And I think they were probably concerned about my ability to run the division. and whether or not I was going to be a value-added leader for them. What I requested of them was to give me the time to prove that they would be pleased with this result at the end of the year versus resistant to it. And I think what helped is, in my previous HR role, I worked very closely with the sales and marketing organization. So I brought the education team very closely aligned with the sales and marketing organization, which they had never been before.
I see.
And they saw the value in that. So I think instead of being the most technical person running the organization, yes, I helped build alliances inside the company, which gave the education team more visibility and more understanding of the business that they were supporting.
So it sounds like you played to your strengths.
Initially I did, but I had a lot of learning to do about how to regroup, right? Mm-hmm.
Could you describe a difficult HR business challenge that you had to face, a leadership challenge that you had to face, and how you dealt with it?
Since we're still in the middle of this particular challenge, a couple of years ago during the internet boom, Xilinx pretty much doubled in size, not only in revenue but also in the number of people in 1 year period. And the very next year we faced the worst recession in semiconductor history. So what that really meant is that we went from $450 million per quarter in revenue to $250 million in revenue.
Boy, that'll take the air out of you.
It definitely took the air out of you. And we said right from the very beginning that layoffs would be our last resort and not our first resort, primarily because we know that the semiconductor industry is a cyclical industry.
What did you do?
Well, first of all, we have a brilliant communicator in the name of our president, and he got on video and talked to the employees about the predicament that we were in, yes, and said, I think that our first strategy needs to be to cut pay. And in fact, I looked myself in the mirror this morning and I said to myself, you need a 20% pay cut. And at that point, we identified that the VPs would get a 15% pay cut, the directors 12%, and we did a tiered pay cut. That was our first strategy.
So management really led by example.
Absolutely, right from the very beginning. We weathered that first storm, if you will, and then 9/11 came along, and we decided that business was not getting any better, and we would have to go the next step. So we did some shutdowns. We also implemented as many innovative programs as we could. One of them that we did was we had a sabbatical. We actually asked employees who would like to leave work for a year without pay, and we would hold on to their benefits. They would continue to get their benefits. We would continue to hold on to their stock option programs. And if they would go away for a year, we would give them a $10,000 bonus if they went to work for a school or if they went to work for a nonprofit organization. Mm-hmm. So those were just some of the ways that we tried to weather that particular storm.
Very creative.
We felt very fortunate. I felt very fortunate that not only our executive team, but eventually the board and even our investors were supportive of the position that we took.
How about the employees?
The employees were remarkably supportive of the way that we went about the recession. And in fact, we were voted by our employees, I think, number 6 in the Fortune 100 Great Places to Work in that same year. In fact, we announced the pay cut in the same year that we were, in the same week that we were sending out the surveys for the Great Place to Work.
Well, that is a major HR business leadership challenge, and it sounds like you met it head on.
Right.
Eileen, could you share a...
Well, a contrasting story. I was a couple of years ago with a startup in the middle of the internet boom as well, and it was a very well-funded $50 million startup with one of the top-tier VCs. And
venture capitalists?
Right, venture capitalists. And as it turned out, we were burning through cash pretty quickly. We had an executive offsite and decided that we did have to, in fact, cut headcount because there wasn't anything else in the business at that early stage that we could do in order to get our product to market fast enough. Through the course of the discussion, because I understood our revenue goals, how much we needed as far as headcount to support those revenue goals. Yes. I was asking some tough questions about his ratios of people in professional services versus operations. And he actually got very perturbed with me in the meeting. And what I was trying to do is lead the discussion around not making decisions around, politically who could protect their people better than somebody else, but let's look at this very objectively. From a revenue standpoint, a support standpoint, look at some business ratios that were available in the industry and make some objective decisions. And the only way we can protect our viability is to figure out how to protect our cash, extend our runway, and my role in that process is to make sure employees are communicated with effectively, treated with respect and dignity, that we are always open and honest with them through the process. And so even though he was very upset with me that day, I think as we started to roll this out and he saw how people were treated through the process, we actually ended up very close through the course of the next 6 months as we shut down the company.
Sounds like these are also valuable lessons in corporate governance.
It's true, and I think one of the tough things about HR, I think our natural inclination is to want to have everybody like us. And many times you have to sit at the table and make some of the tough comments, push people to make some tough decisions. And I think in HR that runs sometimes counterintuitive to what we like to do versus what we need to do to be effective.
What's your thinking about HR business leadership? Does it vary in a large company compared to a small company? What do you think? Could you share some ideas with us?
I think that the fundamental strategies are the same for HR, but I think the tactical implementation plans would be pretty different. In a small startup, you're very concerned, of course, with cash burn, but you're also very, you have to put the infrastructure in place. You really take the infrastructure for granted when you're in a big company.
That's true.
And it's a critical part because you want to build something that's scalable so that it'll grow with your company. And in HR, those processes, if you put them in well in the beginning, at the early phase of the company, allows for you to work on the more important issues rather than scrambling around doing all of the administrative personnel administration.
Eileen, how about you?
Well, it's interesting. The early stage companies, the HR role is even more critical because you need to understand how the company is being funded and capitalized. And if you don't know how to read, a balance sheet or understand capitalization, working very closely with your investors or sitting on your board when you're pre-public, they're with you every single month. And you're sitting at the table talking about the business from a financial perspective, much more so than HR practices and that sort of thing. So I think the intensity of understanding the business and being able to articulate it at the board, things like the cost of labor, especially in a startup, that are running $3 to $5 million a month cash burn, the majority of that cash burn is around cost of labor.
Sure.
So anything you can do to influence and extend that financial runway for them, the investors are happy to hear about. I think once you're public, you tend to be more inwardly focused rather than so directly tied to the investors that are sitting on your board every month.
I'd like now to talk a little bit about the HR function itself. And could you share with us some ideas you have about what you are doing to help the HR function be a leadership function?
We saw that as one of our primary functions through the recession was communicating. And we even enrolled the organization in having these sessions called Managing Through the Tough Times, where every one of our executives sat down with groups of employees and talked about that ecosystem and how it affected Xilinx, but why it was we felt our future was so bright, and that they needed to hang in there with us, and that these strategies would help us weather that storm. So it was a combination of different things that I insisted that we have on the HR team that I think really made a huge difference to the company at large.
Yeah.
In fact, if you talk to the president, he will tell you that it was our communication strategies that had the biggest impact on our ability to weather that storm.
Actually, every HR organization I've inherited, including the one that I'm managing right now, I have a process that I use. And at the beginning of every fiscal year, we discipline ourselves to write a business plan. And a lot of HR people don't take the time to really think about doing a business plan.
Yes.
Everybody has to do a budget, but nobody thinks about a business plan. So the process is I gather my HR team together and have each one of them go out and meet with the line managers, do an assessment of where the current business is, what they see emerging over the coming year, and it's everything from staffing plans to skill development to business issues that we should be attending to with morale, retention, that sort of thing. So you have to set expectations in the beginning of the year about programs you're not going to be able to attend to this year. As the company becomes profitable, we'll add these things in. And so it sets the ground rules of how we're going to run the business. And then two other things that I usually share with my folks are, a lot of times in HR we use HR speak, and these are OD language, and I say, you know, that's language we have to keep in the family. When you go outside and you're talking to line managers, don't talk OD speak. Talk to them about their business issues, talk about things in return on investment, really identify what we're doing to add value to the business in their language, not in our language.
Do line managers review your HR business plan?
Absolutely they do. As a matter of fact, we're doing it this week. I just completed the 2003 business plan. I've reviewed it with the entire executive team, and then each one of my HR folks are going to their client groups and reviewing it at the staff meeting for input, and it's an iterative process.
Do other functions put together a business plan, or is it
Well,
just
it's
HR?
interesting. In the last two companies I've been with, I've been the first one to bring the business plan to the table, and the CEO has sent it out to the E-team and suggested that they use the same format. So in that regard, we have taken a leadership position in how you develop a business plan.
That's a leadership role.
Right.
Thank you. What advice would you offer to someone who wants to develop his or her HR business leadership skills?
First of all, don't be afraid to get out of your comfort zone. If you're starting recruiting, a lot of times people stay in that one functional area.
Yes.
And it's very important to learn every aspect of human resources, particularly if you expect to lead it one day.
Peg?
I think the best advice is take as many lateral moves as you possibly can inside of the HR function. I think starting in recruiting is a great place to start in HR. But don't skip compensation. Compensation's an important role, especially when you get to the board in a VP role. You need to understand those compensation practices. I would highly recommend that you take a role outside of HR after you've been in your career for a little while to fully understand what a great HR partner really is all about.
We've heard a lot of wisdom in these comments. Let's summarize some key points. 1. In terms of HR business leadership, whether you work for a large or a small company, it's important to develop a business perspective in addition to a people perspective. 2. For career development purposes, it's helpful to spend some time in a line operation in order to get to know the business. 3. HR business leadership evolves as companies develop, from the initial startup phase to the high growth phase to the mature phase. In addition, the package of HR products and services is likely to differ for production workers as opposed to knowledge workers. 4. HR business leaders truly rise to the challenge when the economy sinks. They lead by example. They make decisions that are in the best interests of their organization and their employees. They communicate those decisions honestly, and they never fail to treat people with respect and dignity. And 5, the HR function can and should also serve as a leadership function. For example, by developing an annual business plan, or by serving as an important job rotation destination for managers in HR as well as managers from other functional areas. 6, finally, in terms of career advice, no matter where you come from, you simply must be competent in each of the functional areas within HR. Don't be afraid to reach out beyond HR for help. Work hard to develop a global perspective. And above all, never stop learning. We are witnessing a seismic shift in economic life, from manufacturing to service, from physical labor to mental work. Knowledge workers will dominate the 21st century. HR has a great opportunity to facilitate that trend and to enable creativity and innovation. You can be part of that. The choice is yours.
The SHRM Foundation wishes to thank all of the CEOs and HR executives who helped make this series possible by giving so generously of their time and energy, and to the Area 2 SHRM members for their support. This has been an SHRM Foundation presentation.